It was the end of summer break, and the students of Maplewood College were excited for their final group trip before classes resumed. A handful of friends Sam, Emily, Ryan, and Liz decided to explore a lesser-known destination for their trip, an abandoned psychiatric asylum deep in the woods. It was notorious for ghost sightings, eerie noises, and disturbing history. But to them, it was the perfect adventure, a mix of thrill and laughter, or so they thought. The drive was long and winding, taking them away from the safety of the city and into the dense wilderness. By the time they arrived, the sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the grounds. The asylum stood in front of them, its windows shattered, the walls covered in graffiti, and vines creeping up its once majestic facade. "Guys, this place is perfect for a few creepy Instagram posts," Emily said, snapping photos of the crumbling structure. Sam, always the joker, grinned. "Just wait till we start hearing voices. That'll be great for TikTok, right?" Ryan, the most skeptical of the group, rolled his eyes. "You guys don't really believe in all that ghost nonsense, do you? It's just an old building." They entered through a rusted side door that groaned ominously as they pushed it open. The inside was worse than the exterior, peeling paint, decaying furniture, and the faint, musty smell of abandonment. The hallways were narrow, with old patient rooms lining either side. Some of the doors were still intact, but most had been ripped off or shattered long ago. "I don't know, guys," Liz whispered, her nerves showing. "This place gives me the creeps." "Relax," Sam said. "It's just an empty building. Besides, didn't you hear the urban legend? The only thing that haunts this place is an old doctor who went crazy." Ryan laughed, but Liz looked uneasy. "I heard about that too. The patients started vanishing one by one. No one knows what happened to them, and the doctor supposedly died here, but his body was never found." Their laughter echoed through the empty halls as they ventured deeper. They passed what appeared to be the old recreation room, filled with overturned chairs and broken tables. Sam found an old wheelchair and pushed it playfully, the squeaking sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. "Let's head upstairs," Ryan suggested, eager to explore further. The staircase was narrow, with creaky wooden steps that felt as though they could collapse at any moment. At the top, they found more patient rooms, but one stood out. The door was closed, unlike the others, and it had a small window covered in grime. "I dare you to open it," Emily teased Sam. "Dare accepted," Sam said, reaching for the handle. To their surprise, the door creaked open easily. Inside, the room was in stark contrast to the rest of the asylum. It looked clean. The bed was made, the walls were white, and the air felt strangely cold. There was even a small desk with papers scattered across it. "Okay, this is weird," Liz said, her voice trembling. Sam stepped inside, picking up one of the papers. His face paled. "It's a patient file, from 1952. Dr. Winston Briggs." Ryan's skepticism began to waver. "Let's get out of here, this place is creeping me out." As they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. Emily screamed, and Sam rushed to pull the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature in the room dropped, and a low humming sound filled the air. "Stop messing around, Sam," Liz shouted. "I'm not," he shouted back, yanking at the door with all his strength. But it stayed locked. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, and the papers on the desk began to flutter. The lights flickered, though they hadn't been working when they entered. Liz started to cry, her fear now evident. Ryan pounded on the door, trying to force it open, but it felt like an invisible force was holding it shut. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Everyone froze, listening intently. Faint footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the room. Slowly, they approached the door, but there was no one visible through the tiny window. The footsteps stopped just outside. Then, they heard a soft, raspy voice. "I've been waiting." The friends backed away from the door, huddling together, their hearts pounding. The air in the room grew thick, as if something unseen was pressing down on them. Sam's breath came in shallow gasps, and Emily clutched Liz, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. Without warning, the door burst open, slamming against the wall. Standing in the hallway was a figure, a tall, gaunt man in an old-fashioned doctor's coat, his eyes hollow and black. His expression was a mix of anger and hunger. "You shouldn't be here," the figure rasped, his voice filled with malice. The group didn't wait for a second invitation. They bolted out of the room, sprinting down the narrow corridor. The sound of footsteps followed them, growing louder and faster. It was as though the walls themselves were closing in on them. As they reached the staircase, Liz tripped, falling hard onto the wooden steps. Ryan quickly grabbed her, pulling her to her feet, but when they looked up, the figure was standing at the top of the stairs, staring down at them, unmoving. "There's no escape," it whispered. Panic surged through them as they fled back into the asylum's main hallway, but the building seemed different now. The halls stretched impossibly long, twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. Every door they tried was locked, and the walls seemed to pulse, as though alive. "We need to get out of here," Ryan shouted. "I'm trying," Sam yelled back, his voice cracking with fear. They could hear the footsteps again, closer now, echoing through the halls. The asylum was a maze, and no matter which way they turned, they couldn't find the exit. Finally, after what felt like hours of running, they stumbled upon the door they had entered through. It was wide open, the cold night air beckoning them. Without looking back, they sprinted outside, collapsing onto the grass, gasping for breath. When they finally dared to glance behind them, the asylum stood silent, dark, and empty. There was no sign of the figure, no sound of footsteps, nothing but the wind rustling through the trees. The friends didn't speak as they hurried back to the car, their laughter from earlier now a distant memory. As they drove away, the asylum disappeared into the night, but the horror of what they had encountered lingered. They never spoke of that night again. But every now and then, when the wind howled just right, they swore they could still hear that raspy voice whispering, "I've been waiting."